Today's episode is one that has been in the works for a little while now because I got to be on David Palmer, the Leo King's show a couple months ago, and ever since starting my podcast, I knew that he would end up being one of the guests that I featured right on this first little gathering of guests. So today's episode is with David all on the switch into the nodes in Gemini and Sagittarius, because for the first time in 18 months, we have a nodal shift. The nodes were in Cancer and Capricorn for the past year and a half, and just a few weeks ago we got into the switch of the nodes into the North Node in Gemini and the South Node of Sagittarius. So this episode gets all into what exactly that means collectively and what we can all work towards with that in mind. So David is known as a famous celebrity astrologer, David Lawrence Palmer, and he has been making waves in the media with being a media spiritual influencer, having been on TV for over a decade, owning, co-founding, and producing the largest horoscope media network and app, High Vibe TV. David has created a reputation for being the go-to spiritual influencer around the world. David Lawrence Palmer, aka the Leo King, owns and operates multiple OTT media corporations that produce and distribute content via mobile apps, social media, and streaming platforms. The Leo King is also known for his speaking events, national tours, conferences, and documentaries. Currently, David owns the Leo King Inc., 12th House Media Inc., and is the founder of High Vibe and Spiritual Dance Music. The Leo King is about setting trends and disrupting OTT media markets by creating content that is exciting and somewhat controversial. I'm on that one as well. His appearances on TV and in the media always bring an up-to-date version of spirituality in a cutting-edge and exciting manner. So this is a great conversation that dives not only into the astrology on a mundane level, but gives you practical tips to think about this in your own life, and provokes, and yeah, is definitely a too heavy Leo person conversation with all of the storytelling and the energy. So I'm so glad and happy to have had David on and to be sharing this with you. And if this, speaks to you, tag us, share it, let us know, and we can talk about more transits in the future. First thing that we can get into is the overall tone shift, because I think that not only is this a difference in moving from one axis to another, but the axis of Cancer Capricorn was I like to think of it as the mafia was there. It was just not just the South Node there, but it was Pluto and Saturn and Jupiter. And so it was so sober and emphasized. And I think that this switch is bigger than just the normal nodal shift. So how do you characterize and think of the shift now into Gemini and Sag rather than what we had beforehand, which was a bit harsher, but also a bit more grounded?
I think what makes it so unique is not only do the nodes go the opposite direction than the planets do, which bring us to shifting that goes the opposite direction. So we're going from cardinal to mutable, which is so opposite, a starting point to a changeable point, right? And I think especially with the galactic center being at these later degrees of Sagittarius, and when you add to the fact that Gemini and Sag deal with philosophy to the mind, to how we conceptualize through our minds this reality, whereas there's more of a foundational element of Cancer and Capricorn that's more of the physical realm and the emotional realm and how we connect that way. This makes it a lot more bouncy and a lot more wild in how the universe works, whereas Cancer and Capricorn is what we pretty much think in our souls and our minds and our bodies, the things that are set in reality, our home to our career, to basic ways to look at it, or deeper ways of our emotional body to what we want to achieve in this life. But who knows literally with South Node Sag what it is. And then when you combine North Node Gemini, it's the curiosity of trying to filter through trillions of universal files and try and figure out, well, what's the real thing? And it becomes kind of a scattered energy, and belief systems become hyper beliefs with the South Node and Sag.
That's what I think, with the combination of Jupiter conjunct Pluto is why we have just the rise of so many acute and just widespread theories and beliefs about everything that everyone thinks has to be the right way. There's so much conviction around everything, which with the Gemini North Node, it's there's this obsessive increase in getting to the bottom of the truth without necessarily hashing it out, because Gemini is so curious and precocious and brainstorm energy that with Jupiter Pluto, like I'm just not it. I'm not a Gemini Sag person, so have not been into seeing widespread theories treated like doctrine or whatnot, with just so much polarization, which I think started in Cancer Capricorn, because that's literally like the axis of life giving and life ending, now into Gemini Sag. With Sag, I think people are letting go of older belief systems but obsessing over future oriented ones. So I do think one good thing to come out of it might be the death of the guru mindset with like the South Node in Sag, with people now looking to not see one person or one authority as having the truth. But what in like the collective do you think marks examples of the shift from Cancer Capricorn into Gemini Sag? Are there any events right now that you think really hallmark that transition?
I think you brought it up really well, that everybody believes now that they understand what is, especially that Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, because the fact that the South Node in Sag, looking at Sagittarius and that dispositor being Jupiter, and it's in its full position, it's retrograde, and it's with Pluto, is everybody thinks that they are Dick Tracy, that's the old way, or I guess that they're part of CSI New York, or they've given all the information, which that's the thing, is every bit of information we don't know anything about. And that's what the North Node in Gemini is everybody has to really go into that old, hermetic alchemy style of like seeing the dark and seeing the light and processing and only taking for what is factual and real. And that's kind of hard right now too, because then you mix Neptune that's squaring these nodes, and we don't know where information is really coming about. So it's actually kind of the trickiest situation of all time, because not only is there actual truth to the fact that there is something that we all need to detect right now or be detectives about, but then which facts are real are almost impossible to decipher, especially Neptune ruling the media. It comes from, one day you think that the media is right on this end, but then you're like, no, on that end. And everybody is in that whole paradigm that I would say is lost, like the old show on ABC. It's what it feels like right now. Like, what's going on? And at the very end, they find out they're dead or something, it's like, what? But I would say that with the North Node and Gemini, it's like, it's a time to just, it's so simple. Like, it's just like very simple things. And when somebody asks me like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? I'm like, well, when it shows itself, me some real data, I'll let you know.
Yeah.
And so people can kind of get like, that's how you stop the hype real quick. Like, it's like, well, when I see it, I'll believe it, right? That's the whole lesson. It's very simple. And actually, it's an exalted position in Western astrology, the North Node of Gemini, because Mercury does rule the original aspect of astrology here. So, that's being an astrologer, right? It's like, well, I mean, I'm pretty sure it'll do this, but I at least know the basics that Pluto or Jupiter or this planet or this arc or this zodiacal releasing moment is going to be this. I know that's a fact. And at that moment, that time, something will happen. You know what I mean? There's like that element to astrology too, where it's like, at least we understand those facts to get you to that spot. But when you add the Sag element, that's the predictive kind of element, right? It's kind of like the possibilities are so. And everybody's bringing out so many possibilities or hypotheses about life, and almost feeling like that they're guaranteed gonna happen, when you don't know that.
I with the recent findings, I know that Chris Brennan and Ben Dykes recently translated the origins of the exaltation scheme, so that now it's understood. For like a lot of thousands of years we were just taking people's word for it, but now you can actually see the astronomy behind the principles of how that lines up with light and visibility. And I thought it was really interesting when I learned about the rationale behind the nodes being exalted, North Node in Gemini and South Node in Sag, because at first I was like, that doesn't make sense when people would say that, because I didn't understand how a non-planet could be exalted. I thought that the concept was like fallacious. But now I see that in that scheme, the nodes are exalted in Gemini and Sag, not by affinity, but by default, based on if every other planet is in its exaltation.
Right.
The astronomy lines up so that the nodes have to be in Gemini and Sag, which I was thinking about in terms of now, with exaltation being power behind you, not necessarily innate ability, but like you are supported by your environment to exaggerate, not that you're inherently you're not inherently gifted innately by your abilities. It's more like your environment is obsessed with getting you there. Having that in the sky without the rest of the planets in their exaltation to support and like validate that, I think goes to reinforce this obsession with everyone's like personal theory around having to be correct. And I've just seen, never before have I felt like maybe I'm the only person that isn't claiming to be like an armchair epidemiologist and political scientist. Like, I don't know how I'm going to confirm Pizzagate. So I don't know why people are so obsessed with finding my viewpoint, because there's no way I'm ever going to be able to validate that coming as like a 20-something astrologer. So I think that's been really interesting in the power behind the nodes without the planets providing the grounding at the same time.
Yeah, and it's funny because there are these invisible knots that these nodes are. And it's an interesting thing that you bring up, especially I think it's funny that there was a Jeffrey Epstein story of the arrest of his ex-girlfriend. Right, before we went and did this, right? So again, that's something that's happened in culture that's been building up to this, because we have to remember that even though the nodes are here, what are they covering? They're covering even from 2016 when we had Saturn and Sagittarius and the squares to Neptune with the South Node in Pisces. So there's so many things that have been going on in this Sag Pisces realm from then that, you know, people started accusing people that haven't even been tried in court yet, right? That you are automatically guilty without even going to court yet and being guilty by the judge or the jury yet, right? So that's why the exaltation of Gemini needs to be like, well, where's the evidence to life? Like, let's see what the evidence is. And with that South Node in Sag, remember that Jupiter and the benefics love the South Node, because it's almost like, let's believe in the imagination, or let's believe in the illusion. Like there's the illusion of beliefs, the illusion of love with Venus, right? Like, but with North Node Gemini, it's like, they're not calling me back. I need to probably get off my butt and get out of the house instead of thinking they're going to call me back when they never call me back. You know what I mean? Like, it's like those little things, it's stupid little things, but they are lifesavers. Whereas South Node Sag stuff, I was bored with this. So it's like, I had to learn this life, be like, they're not going to call me back. And I'm going to wait all night here for that and not make any plans and do all that, even though I already have seen enough data that this has happened the last 5 times, or this has happened the last 6 times. It's in my environment that you said earlier, the environment in which that somehow we all are put underneath is what we need to focus on right now anyway. And I would say that, to go back to your original question about what we're seeing in the world right now, is everybody so concerned about countries in the world and foreign energy of what is everybody else doing? What is that? It's like, no. Right now, all that matters with North Node and Gemini is your local environment and your space. And it's not even, it goes even smaller than like your home, right? It's like your desk area that you are sitting at, the area right now that you're right here, and what your world is from your peripheral right here. And just be focused on that area, because does it really matter what's happening everywhere else? That's the whole thing, is because that's where a lot of the fear is coming from right now, is when you're taking so much in that you can't process because you're not getting any data. So the mind's going to flip out. And then that brings up mental health, which I would say that is the deepest underlying issue that we're seeing right now, going on right now through this crisis. That, of course, there's data showing the crisis is real, but at the same time, there's so much other data showing there are other major crises going on, whether it's financial and that's the Gemini thing. It's like, but there's this and there's this and there's this and there's that whole Sag thing. It's like, no, let's blow up this one big thing. You know what I mean? And let's not look at all the other little things that actually have just as much weight, or maybe even possibly more data-wise.
Right. It's been interesting as someone who in secret, but I don't speak on it a lot, I guess. I just like following foreign policy and just political
Same
events in
here.
general. And it's been interesting since the South Node moved into Sag, the amount of nebulousness or lack of clarity around things that are happening outside of, specifically, I guess, from our perspective, the US, just with weirdness around North Korea and like whether he's alive, Kim Jong Un's alive or
Yeah.
whatever, and huge issues outside the US that like all of a sudden just aren't being spoken about, that just have a lack of clarity around them, like things in Yemen and whatnot. Whereas with the North Node here, like you said, there's been so much about lack of attention span in making decisions for ourselves, and instead feeling like we need to reach the truth around other people's realities, or around placing blame and placing opinion on things that aren't relevant to us, instead of like looking and just making short-term decisions. And I think that the North Node and Gemini can be incredibly useful for turning to facts instead of the Cancerian, what did I need to feel at that point? That if we've created a safe emotional environment, we should be able to then build a logical foundation upon that. And yeah, I'm not looking forward to the Neptune conversation though, because with it being the beginning of next year, especially at the bending of the nodes, I've always seen that and adopted the both Indian traditions view of it as a middle ground breaking point, and more of the evolutionary viewpoint is the skip step. I think they're both a really useful way of conceptualizing that. How do you look at Neptune at the bending of the nodes? What kind of conversation are you expecting around that?
I think it would be like a cross between that. Both views is like the destiny point.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a destiny point, and there is both, as you say, right? I would say that it skips steps and also a breaking point, but I would combine those into a destiny point of a choice between where, and if we're going to think of this as a collective or a mundane horoscope, let's say, that the collective has a choice of which side of the fence they're going to aim their energy, which of course you want to choose the north. But that's the kind of weirdness about Vedic astrology, is like they really put so much negative emphasis on how dangerous Rahu is and how he'll illusionize you too, that there's an illusion with both. But you actually but you kind of need the illusion of Rahu, at least, because at least it can use the head. And that's also why there is an old, and I'm not a Vedic astrologer, but I've been seeing a lot and reading a lot about, when the nodes do come into Gemini and then they do come into Taurus, this is the two spots that, the North Node at least, where Rahu is like the best, because there is something to say about the reality and figuring that out in the mind and how it sees things of this reality. But this Neptune thing is throwing this thing for a curveball none of us have ever seen in our lives, because the last time that the nodes actually squared Neptune, with the north being around this zone, let's say, was when it would have had to have been the Taurus North Node squaring Neptune in Aquarius.
Yeah.
Which we're about to see a bunch of those squares with Saturn and Uranus, of course.
Yeah.
And of course with Jupiter and Uranus too. But this is weirder because I was born with the North and South Node in Gemini and Sag at 5 degrees. And then I had Neptune and Chiron both square my nodes in Gemini and Sag. And I mean, I'll be honest, it did my spirituality and my, it made me who I am today as an astrologer. It really was my breakout. It was my UAC of 2012 to all the stuff that I did, but it made me feel like I was on a completely different plane and universe, that I couldn't even figure out how to go walk through a CVS without feeling like I was seeing the whole universe, and at the same time terrified of the reality of which we live in. That my mind started to actually put together that there are so many things that are possible or could be true, and that brings up mental health. And then I went through panic disorder, and I went through anxiety disorder, and that was the triggering point. And actually Jeff Jower gave me a reading during that time before he passed away. And he was like, these are the connecting points, right? That's how he always like to describe them to the reality. I mean, you could, whether you want to look at it as like how we look at a matrix understanding, but to have Neptune square that, it's disassociation too, right? So people are about to disassociate. And it's ironic because Neptune here has to deal with the media, and we've been seeing South Node Neptune was the election of 2016.
Yeah.
And now we're about to see the square point to the nodes with Neptune. And so this election is going to have major weird, like karmic, but also singing very similar weird tones. But I think that this is going to flip us all for a complete different scenario, and people trying to believe what's real and what's not real. And people also at the same time feeling mental health stress from taxing and feeling overloaded, when they have to learn to just like let go and surrender. And this is going to be a very difficult one. And it's not going to, and I don't think that people might be really prepared, because if they think that the beginning of these nodes since May 5th have been crazy of 2020, that point when they square that destiny's point, it's going to be out of this world, literally, you know?
That's the way that I thought of it too, because it'll be happening while this fall, that'll be happening while Mars will be retrograde, Mercury will be retrograde, which on their own aren't particularly, they're troublesome, but they're not big indicators, but compiled on top of one another within they will be the slowest and the most, like they're at their slowest point during the election. That's just really not cute. That's the way that I'm seeing that. And also
there's a new moon that's in Libra that's going to cause this huge T-square.
Yeah.
To everything in Capricorn and that Mars retrograde in Aries. And then in that cycle is the election, and it's a falled moon. Sun and new moon, but then and it's crushed, that new moon, by Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter. It's crushed by the opposition of Mars retrograde. And that was the Mars retrograde of 88 that opposed the sun. That was Ronald Reagan at the UN, who told everybody that we need to come together through an alien attack. If that happens, so that might bring us together. But there's going to be that Neptune square that's like, I don't know about if they're already pushing agendas like that. And so people are like, they must be real. I'm like, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to believe my whole life that UFOs are real and everything by a freaking weird video that I'm seeing in the media that's being pushed all the time. I'm somebody who's like, we need to see a lot more than that.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Since you were speaking about how Vedic astrology tends to demonize the North Node, and I think that in Western astrology sometimes they can obsess over the North Node, and I think it's like a cultural difference with reverence for the past versus obsession with the future. And I've been thinking a lot about this just as someone with a Sun North Node conjunction who knows both the discomfort of having like an otherworldly type of ego, like want you to do so much that doesn't feel like you. That I think that people with the North Node in Gemini, there's this obsession with getting the right opinion or being on like the right side of history, whereas Neptune pretty much indicates that that's impossible because we don't even have context beneath us to be able to form that. And with this fall or early 2021 being the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius, I think that's really paradoxical, as if there's like a new epoch starting or a new era with the air signs and the North Node in Gemini, but then Neptune's squaring all of it. So that I think that it seems like we're going through it in 2020 into early 2021 on just like wipeout scale. And then there's a new beginning in early 2021, but that we don't understand or see it because Neptune is just so foggy and fuzzy. And I don't know if we're going to take it seriously when all this happens. And I've been doing, I spent a lot of time, I guess what the little free time I have researching like the world events with astrology, because I find that really interesting. And the events that were taking place with the nodes in Gemini and Sag, particularly when there was a Neptune aspect to them, some type of hard aspect in some ways, had to do with, interestingly, environmental like manipulation in various ways, either no longer destroying the environment or deciding to, in invading other countries or space, like outer space, and in racial tensions, which all of those things with the Saturn Uranus square coming up, like, I don't want to say frighten me because I'm not scared, but I think that that feeling like we need to rebel or take over could be really exacerbated. Um, what thoughts do you have about the types of things that we can expect moving forward, or more kinds of events that we're seeing as we get further into this transit?
I think you bring up great points. I've noticed a lot of those similar things as well with Neptune and nodes, but it's weirder to me because with the South Node being in Sag, and actually Pisces, where Neptune is, like that's who's the other ruler? Jupiter. And Jupiter is not gonna be, Jupiter's going through a lot right now.
Oh my
Let's just be
God. Yeah.
real. It's being besieged at the worst position it could be in Capricorn, with Pluto and Saturn being in the house that it doesn't want to be in, with eclipses, with
Yeah.
the nodal transit that went through it. Then you'd think, oh, well, Jupiter, Saturn, it's wonderful. It's like, no, Jupiter and Saturn, both of them have to get along, which they don't like each other. And they just were with each other in a house, and Saturn had all the power. But then Saturn comes into Aquarius and has more power. So Jupiter again is like,
Right.
oh, right? And remember that technically Jupiter is the son of Saturn,
Yeah.
like, so now Jupiter's going there, and then Jupiter's like, I got Uranus now, my grandpapa, that I got to go
Yeah.
square, and so this is not a very good time for especially the belief systems. And, this is going to be very difficult, I believe, because the Neptunian element to this, it starts to get religious too much with Neptune Jupiter stuff, right? And
Right.
especially with South Node. And then it also does just on anybody's belief system on how things are with looking at any data, right? Like we
Mhm.
saw a lot of this, that there is injustices and they have to be dealt with, but they have to be calmed down. And there also has to be maybe more talks at tables. And here's the facts. And everybody has to kind of give, now here's where your facts are, because then there's hyperboles and hypothesis about that. It blankets everybody's going through it.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And everybody's not going to go to hell if they don't believe in Jesus, or everybody's going through a racial injustice at every second of the day, or every cop, or every person. Like it becomes too much. It's like, and that's where Neptune. I have an Aleister Crowley book of his description of Neptune, and it's old, and it's from like UAC 86 that Jeff
Mm.
Dower had, and he talks very deeply about why Neptune's back is to the sun, because even when he wrote that in the I think it was the 1910, there was no Pluto yet.
Yeah.
And so as he's looking out there at these dreams, and Neptune's looking for all these things, because when you are so lonely away out there in the universe, all you have left are those dreams that don't become real. It's and there's that whole element of these people that are going to be going through all parts of life. It's going to be, like you said, a clash of the religious institutions and belief against social injustice warriors, to people that are conspiracy theorists, to people who believe that the media is always right, to it's just going to go.
Yeah.
And the only people that can really, I would say, calm the whole waters down is to, one, remember that we need to find some sort of youthful and some positive Gemini energy and find commonality between people, because the connector of Gemini is the twins, and the twins are crossed by two, I like to say it looks like a bridge at the top, and then even a foundational like bridge that connects these two beams together. And I think that the commonality between humans and people, that we all have five senses. That's one fact. We have to go back to the most basic kindergarten, youthful kid stuff to get us back to reality, because this is like us all becoming really old sages and hermits and people yelling at each other that we figured out Merlin's secrets better than the other person did, if we want to use an analogy. And nobody's right. Like, and that's going to be the hard part for people. People think that no. And then when you have that Mars retrograde for this, through the cycle that it's going to be at, everybody's going to be ramped up. And the ego is going to try and push through, and Chiron's going to be like, hey, why don't, let me hold that ego for a second, and let me see what it's like if you actually used it for something positive and simple about connecting, instead of forcing your own ego's belief on things.
Yeah, I was thinking about the best sides of Gemini. When I think of strong Gemini in a personality, it's conversation starter, and it's the ability to always bounce ideas off of others. And then the shadow side is more of being unable to hang on to a thought long enough to get to the bottom of it or to retain information. And I think that that's been playing a role with, on a less political side, just cancel culture, like people being really, I actually don't understand it. Like the whole idea of putting the power on someone else, like why not? I think we can, like we were speaking about, just call that back to ourselves and say that if someone else seems to be in some Neptunian delusion that we find offensive, that we can exit ourselves, and we don't have to condemn every other idea, even if it is problematic, as something related to us. Like we don't really need to. I've been seeing that along with I think it plays into the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction. And I think that in spring, summer of next year, so about a year from now, Mars will be crossing the North Node. And that, I think, will be the pivotal time of more aggression around who or what was right. I think that right now it's building up to Neptune, and then there being some increased tension around that, because that's when the Saturn-Uranus square will be more exact. And that specifically would have been happening in some of the, I have some of the events down that were really marked with these, like, the 16th Street church bombing in Alabama. And then there were multiple accusations of terrorist events where the classification is muddy, whether or not these people were external terrorists or people here in the US that were causing hate crimes. And then there's special reports of the US condemning Japanese internment camps, and things regarding HIV and AIDS as well, which makes sense just with the Jupiter-Saturn happening in air signs again as well. But what do you foresee with going into next year, some of the either developments or changes based on what we're going through now with the nodes, and how that's going to alter as we move further back in Gemini Sag?
Well, I think you bring up some good points in history. I mean, the nodes were around in this spot in 1884 during a Saturn Pluto, during a Jupiter. Well, actually, it wasn't Jupiter, but during the time of the Saturn Pluto. And I would say that that's continuing. And when we see Jupiter Saturn, there is going to be an 84 element, and we're going to see Pluto do its actual return to America's chart. And so that's going to be quite the show in the American story. And I would say that this is going to be bigger, because if we think of 2003 with North Node and Gemini, and that's where we saw the TSA, and that's where then we start to shift the narrative from Afghanistan to no, it had shifted to Iraq. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's going to be a lot of shifting beliefs or shifting, and with Neptune here still, there's that whole like, no, we're going here, like out of nowhere. There's spells. These are spells being dropped on people, and almost to be used to do clashes by invigorating people's belief systems and hyper belief. I'm calling them hyper belief because it's almost like out of nowhere shooting, and I've been saying this one for years because I look back at, for me, the 2016 Neptune South Node as how people will change their life off a documentary off Netflix within a day.
So
that,
true.
that I've never been that person. I've always been like, and I have these notes, so I've had to learn this life. Like, okay, you did a really good job putting that story together for me, but let me go look for it myself, or let me go investigate it myself and try that out. Let me actually go experience it actually in my reality. Like, what if I did eat a Big Mac every day for 20 days? Let me see what happens. You know what I mean? I didn't do that, but you know what I mean? There's that whole, okay, let's go try some of that stuff instead of be like somebody else's experience should be defined by you understanding it, which is, of course, empathy, which is what Neptune rules, which we can have empathy, but it doesn't mean we're going to understand fully, and you can't force that upon people. So you can't force somebody to have empathy that you're not a Republican or you're not a Democrat or you're not this or you're not that. Like, we can understand as best as we can, but some people can really be like, I want you to experience what I did. And I think that Saturn squaring Uranus is actually, it's quite the battle. I mean, if you really think about the Uranus Saturn energies in mythology, I mean, it's pretty much the castration out of Uranus as being the ruler of the universe, and Kronos taking power and control from his own father and betraying his father. But it's and you know what, and it is kind of weird that it'll be Saturn in Aquarius. So Saturn's actually in his father's home, and then Uranus is in Taurus, which is pretty dull there for Uranus. That's a lot of Earth for it to dig through with its crazy AI sentinel bots that it's trying to figure out. That's been my analogy of Uranus and Taurus, sentinels in the Matrix. But I would say that this is going to be, I don't think as scary as what we saw this year, I would say, just because this was the initiation year.
Right.
And that this is going to help people really go, with the nodes in Gemini, okay, let me get my facts straight and let me see if it's, okay, the collective does need things and changes, but the understanding of the collective with Uranus and Taurus is that everybody has different values. Everybody's going to pick a different perfume or cologne, or none at all. Or everybody's going to pick a different shirt color, or everybody's going to pick a different this, right? There's some about Taurus that's like, I know what I like individually. And so the collective has to remind itself that it can't all look the same, or else we're not a collective anymore. The collective is so beautiful because of the individuality that Saturn in Aquarius is going to have to remind people. So when we start trying to form groups in unity consciousness, it's about allowing people to still have their individuality. And that's going to be politicized very deeply. Maybe we shouldn't. Maybe everybody should have the same values. It's like, uh-oh, that's actually not what the facts show in the data of life, that when we blanket everybody that has the same values, that's where you get into communism, or that's where you get into Marxism, or you start to get into some pretty crazy stuff that actually looks good at the moment, but then ends up of, well, the people who didn't agree end up in a camp and gone.
Yeah.
And that's where, this is where we have to remind ourselves, Aquarius and the revolution. Everybody's saying that, Jupiter Saturn is going to be the entrance to the age of Aquarius. But how long have we been saying that?
Yeah.
Or how long has people been saying that, right? It's like, well, I think the ultimate test of the entrance of the age of Aquarius is going to be, do you really know how to allow people to still be individuals and free?
Yeah.
Instead of projecting your own belief systems. We're not, as astrologers, we don't project, you must know astrology. You know what I mean? Like, that's not what an astrologer does.
Yeah.
That's like our last thing we want to do. When somebody comes up, I'm sure you get it all the time. I've been seeing your TikToks lately, they've been blowing up. I'm sure you're getting people being like, oh my God, it's not real, or da da da. It's like, what are you gonna do? Are you gonna force feed it down their throat? No.
Yeah. I think that what I've been thinking on is how with Gemini, it makes sense that there would be more connection online, like through the pandemic, just Zoom going crazy and whatnot. And I've been thinking a lot about how life in and of itself is algorithmic. So what you're focusing on will inherently increase. And if you're focusing on something that you don't want, that's the data that you're going to keep getting reconfirmed. Is this oppressive or destructive mindset will just keep getting reconfirmed. And that, along with actually just today, I was listening to Brene Brown's podcast, and I really like her and her work. And she was talking about how shame and guilt are really different, whereas shame is the thought that I am bad. Guilt is the thought that I did something bad. And
Hmm.
shame is directly associated with substance abuse and addiction because it makes you think that you can't change because you are bad. Whereas guilt can actually be very useful because it indicates that you did something that is harmful, but that you have the power to change because you committed an action. And I've been using this as an invitation to change mindsets and how I respond to information, because at first I really did want to respond to every single comment and get in the last word, because Mercury and Leo stationed direct within like 6 hours of my birth, opposite Uranus. I will. And I had to think, if I keep literally on the app, if I keep doing this, I will keep attracting people that have their algorithm as being trolls, and I will keep doing this. So I had to distance myself from perpetually responding. And I think that that can be an invitation for others to, in their own way, no longer entertain energy drains of information and respond if it's a teaching point. I mean, I called someone out for an ad hominem against me for being a woman. So what do I know? That was a good teaching point because I could point out what a fallacy is. But what other recommendations would you give to people in their personal life for navigating these transits?
Well, I mean, I just want to say before we go in there, like, I think any influencer, especially that is an astrologer influencer, which is a very new space, right?
Right.
Like, trust me, I get it, and I get all. It'll be funny because all the people that put all the nice comments are. It's like always 97%
Yeah.
negative, right? And it's like all the 97% are like, why don't you say thank you to me, right? So that's the other part now that's going on, right? It's people like, I put all these nice comments for somebody, but they only respond to the negative ones,
Yeah.
and there's not that many. So it's like, this is just about like everybody. And I think the shame guilt thing that you brought up is a big thing, right? It's like, nobody's going to be able to understand through shaming. And that's what
Yeah.
we're seeing. And actually, I think that the deeper element of shame is stigma,
Mm.
which is like, the stigma of, well, I think astrology has been the longest form of stigma for a long time.
The
But
gold
I'm not,
standard of superstition, as it's known.
you're right. So it's like, there becomes irony everywhere. And I think that we all are going to have to realize that these nodal placements, this Neptune stuff, Neptune did not do well last time it was in Pisces in the third decan.
Mm.
Doesn't do well. And it didn't do well even in the cycle prior with 1692 being 19 degrees Pisces of the witch trials,
Right.
to 20 degrees being in 1856, the beginning of the invisible divide that created the Civil War in America. So we are entering into not only a very, very extremely foggy zone and a very out there into obsession with space and the universe.
Yeah.
You'd think that's more Uranian, but there's something to say about Neptune's, fascination or dreams, or kind of Stanley Kubrick vibration
Yeah.
of 2001, A Space Odyssey, of that actually it was the idea of how we even created the space program, and the look of a ship and the understanding of all that comes from the mind of somebody who actually created a movie of it.
Yeah.
That the irony that's going to come up for us is people are going to believe that they're creating things based on their own merits or their own creations, where a lot of this has been subliminally projection
Mm.
out into our reality through media, film, music, television, that has been stacked as blockbusters in our brain, right? Of nonstop collection of all these reel-to-reel tapes, to reels, to DVDs, to little videos that you've seen, that the collection of all that has been coming to this apex point here with the nodal shift, where your mind is going to have to go, is this my thought, or is this been somebody else's belief of how reality is.
Yeah.
And that's the ultimate test of what alchemy is. It's, okay, I will look at it. I'm not going to not look at it.
Yeah.
That's the whole beautiful part of the North Node in Gemini is like, I'm going to look at it, but I'm going to make sure that I've looked at both sides. And does this connect with that ultimate God source? Have I gone through all 12 wheels of consciousness to check it all out? Have I truly understand the feminine and the masculine of things? And have I balanced it all out enough to be neutral where I'm not emotional about it, right? That's the whole part here that's hard about alchemy, especially Hermeticism, is like, you can't get emo, and I'm an emo person, you know what I mean? I think we all are. But it's like, doing astrology is like a lifesaver, I'm sure, for you, and I know it is for me. I don't know. But that's where we all have to ask questions, right? Like, we can't assume somebody is just because we're going through the experience of it ourselves. That astrology has helped me out with my emotions, because it's the only thing that has ever taught me how to go, let me not get emotional about it. Let me actually look at what's the data say. And then going through the hardships and the pain in life of where I believed in something so much, but the astrology said otherwise, and I went through with it anyway, and learning, the process of learning through the data and fact, and actually by sometimes going through a illusion and experiencing it and then realizing, you know, maybe I should have questioned it more. Maybe I should have, I knew the data. So there's something about knowing, but it's how we know it and where's that coming from. And there's something to say about media that is coming to a very weird point, that even the media itself, I think people, if we look at the data, like, these people are reading off teleprompters. So like, most of the time they don't even know they're part of that system. They're just trying to make money to go home and feed their kids and all that stuff, right? So it's like, but there is some sort of way that the subconscious of the media itself has created, from all the ways and all the forms. And then at the beginning of the CV crisis, it was like, oh my gosh, the Woonham lab looks like the Umbrella Corporation. You know, that was the first thing I remember about this whole thing. And I was like, okay, like, is that true? Like, you know, like, okay, I see a picture of it, different, same logos, different color. You know, is that the real picture? Like, we all are about to see that all the movies, the films, and all the, even books to stories, they're all coming into easily being like, I'm going to play it this way. Like, I'm going to use this movie, or this looks like Terminator 2, Judgment Day, or this looks like, you know, Sound of Music. You know what I mean? Like, I'm so happy. Like, everybody's fine. Or, you know, there's so many different stories. This is crazy story time. And people almost start painting the roses red everywhere. And it's like, that's the scary part, is like, it's almost how well people are dealing with their own numbness to the truth that this reality has been completely projected on in a way that there is no such thing as original thought left. And that's what I think we're coming into the 2021, is the transits of who has original thought and who is just retweeting, resharing. I mean, we're already seeing it right now, right? Whether it's politics or even things that are going on with protests and stuff, like, there's not a lot of original thought. Everybody's kind of sharing what other person shared, which another person shared, which another person shared. That there's nothing wrong with that. But there is that whole idea of like, who's got original thought right now and original thinking and coming up with original ideas of what to do with all this, because it's almost like nothing's going anywhere.
Right.
And that's the hard part of South Node and Sag, is if you just believe it'll go somewhere, it won't.
Especially with a fallen Jupiter ruling that, I think.
Correct.
I think that's similar to what I would encourage, is that we can't look to external truth to confirm our own beliefs anymore. We really need to interrogate just the baseline, really rudimentary, like, hierarchy of needs things in our life, because I do agree that some of it might have come from the fact that we are more online right now, and so therefore there's just more accumulation of ideas. But I do think that there's so little there's little original thought in terms of the easy access to copying out to someone else, and there's also a lot of finger pointing for saying that things aren't original because there's insecurity around having original thought. I know for me, having Venus as a Time Lord recently has not been cute with Venus retrograde and Venus square Neptune, and just somehow after not, I don't even look at other astrology content. I really don't resonate with doing very many things. Like, I very much keep to myself, and suddenly I'm being accused of all kinds of things. So it's been a trip for me. But
Right.
That's what I would recommend for others too, is to think about their own base level choices and beliefs and not feel the need to project out getting the truth. And yeah, really look within with that.
Yeah, ask questions to people for them to make their own questions to the question and their own answers to the question. Because when you just tell somebody it is as this is as it is, you know, then that just kind of becomes where maybe that is adding to the problem. And I think that we all get caught up into it. So that's the beautiful part of astrology and the nodes. And, you know, we learn through this cycle. It's a circuit loop that we need the Sagittarian, you know, kind of openness to even ask the question sometimes, and to be willing to have that confidence, because there's not a lot of confidence in Gemini.
Yeah.
Right? Like Mercury's unsure if it's going to go meet with a malefic or a benefic. Even though it actually is smart enough to know it, it almost wants to go into its own delusions of like, oh, I'm really going to go meet with Saturn and Pluto and the Sun on the conjunction of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction? I am. And that's what I think that this all comes down to, is that this next 30 plus year cycle that was Saturn-Pluto on January 12th of 2020 was with Mercury and the Sun. I mean, can you make any more, like, can you make that up mathematically anymore? Like,
Right.
no. And Mercury is smashed in between all that, and it's with the malefics, all three, because actually technically the Sun is a malefic.
Yeah.
So all three malefics just completely on each other. And that is the battle of people's minds, and it's in Capricorn, the control of people's minds.
Right.
And there is a force beyond Neptune that even Neptune didn't know. Neptune also was, though, in this book, which actually I have here, and I didn't plan this, but I just have it here, Aleister Crowley's original writings, that Neptune's the one that warns the Sun of weird asteroids and weird beings that are coming into the solar system. But little did he know that Pluto would be there and Hades would be there, the underworld. And seeing Pluto do its crazy orbit with this Pluto conjunction, or with the Saturn conjunction, right, was that it swept into being the ecliptic line of the Sun and the planets, and then now it's going back down into the underworld, but it's taking Saturn with it, like you know what I mean, energetically, into the underworld. We're watching reality go into the underworld.
Yeah.
And to conceptualize that in the mind too, is everybody is going to almost be easily manipulated to be sheep, based upon like that somebody has, so this is where people are going to create this, I'm going to say superiority, because that's a word being used a lot right now. Which we need to look at who's actually trying for superiority by taking advantage of people's minds and putting them all against each other, and then laughing and watching it all happen, to where it'll be so, people will be so over it. They'll be over getting nasty at each other. They'll be so over it, but it'll be at the moment when they're all in the gates and locked in there. You know what I mean? And that's where people need to wake up now, because it's like, this is what's happening. We are being played by both sides. We are being played by everything, by forces that even go beyond our understanding. And that's where the whole thing is. You can't actually define that because it's South Node Sag. You can't say it's the reptilians, and you can't say it's this or something like that, because there is no data or proof on that. And you can, of course, maybe inside of yourself, but don't project that into the reality. But that's going to be what we're realizing, is that the sheep herder has shown up, and it's got a very secret element to it all, and it's with trying to, like a tick, come into our mind and implant. Ironically enough, Elon Musk is talking about implanting things into our brains right now, while at the same time being a hero in other people's minds for this, or going to space. And that's the other thing is I had a very interesting thought about, well, what would be the easiest way to get a bunch of people, and this is very sad, so I'm not going to say it's true, but what would be a way to get people out and think they're going to this place? But what happens if those ships full of people just bye?
Yeah.
You know, like I think of like, and this, I'm gonna get cryptic for a second, but like murder, right? That's been talked about a lot. But like, if you were to murder, because I'm a questioner in life, it's like, where would you want to go? Well, the vacuum of space is always the easiest way, right? You see it in sci-fi movies and stuff, but it's like there's something. Why are they pushing us so into space? Why are they pushing us so in there? Why are they just shooting up? Why is SpaceX now a private company mixing with the government company to go do stuff? And we're supposed to see it as this beautiful revolutionary moment, but there's so much more beyond that. And the Space Force launching in the middle of this crisis, these are just facts, this high frequency satellite, that's what they say it is. But it's top secret. What are those high frequencies that they're putting? And it's like, okay, why is it? And even yesterday, there was a big satellite that was brought up because they're saying, well, we haven't changed the satellites for GPS for 20 years. So we're starting to put up some new ones.
Yeah.
But there's something about them trying to get us to go out to this land. And every sci-fi movie keeps proving that every time we go out there, it all goes to hell. It all goes wrong. And I'm not saying that we're not supposed to go, but there's definitely going to be that push with Saturn Uranus, I think, as well. There's something beautiful about it that people keep looking at all the systems and the government and we need to make change and the people need more. I think the people already have the ability to make the change now. And that's the irony in all this, is that's all that people think, that it's like these moments that are coming up that are finally allowing it. It's like, you're going to realize the whole time that you could have done it right now. Like, what were you doing? You're on the couch?
Yeah, I think that's it, that we can make the changes within ourselves. We don't need to look outside ourselves, and that all of that inquiry about the external agendas is just, like you said, it's all speculation, and that we can do that and still prioritize more the truth that we can confirm with what our choices can be logical around, and really bring that power back to ourselves instead of looking to project the power of being right onto external agendas and whatnot. Where can people find you and your all of the things with you?
All the things. I'll keep it simple. I own highvibe.tv, an app and website where I do all my horoscopes and videos, and then I go by the Leo King, so you can just look up the Leo King and find out everything there. But those are the two spots, and everything's there.
Dope. Well, this has been a really helpful conversation, not only predictively and looking at the trends, but I think gives people something to focus on themselves, which is what I'm focusing on, is focusing on myself during this and my own decisions. So thank you for contributing all your knowledge around this and your astrology input and the really beautiful take that you have on the transits and how they're happening. And yeah, thank you for sharing all that.
No, yeah, and thanks for having me on. And I just like to finish with what you just said, is that if we're going to be predictive, and I like to make bold predictions, that there are going to be events that are going to show up here near the end of the year, especially during October. And I don't think there's a coincidence with Ronald Reagan's. I'm just using fact, right, and time that Ronald Reagan used. It's almost like, are they really gonna really try and push some sort of like alien story? Or you're gonna need to really realize that you're gonna have to do the facts on your own and not believe things really fast. If they do some sort of stories out there that there is this thing out there, or there's going to be definitely a lot of falsities, and there's also going to be a lot of uncoverings, and you're going to have to do that facts on your own. And you're not going to, this is where people get easily swayed by people, because let's be real. Let's look at how this whole thing enveloped this year. There's been a lot of energy where people like have lost their jobs, Jupiter, Pluto, and Capricorn, or lost the path or the way. And so when it comes into Aquarius here, it almost is this like, well, there's something about this 20-year cycle of Jupiter Saturn that's finishing a Jupiter Saturn in Taurus. Let's not forget that. And that Jupiter Saturn in Taurus is finishing during the 6 months here that we're ending. Not even, it's like 5 months now. And the ultimate of Jupiter and Taurus and Jupiter Saturn Taurus was, you need anything. If you found trying to find reliance on the outside of yourself right now, even look at how the banking system failed us here at the end of it, right? Like, you have your own sovereign, beautiful energy that can create and manifest. And it's ironic because everybody's so against money and everything. And yet there's something about Jupiter and Saturn that said, it's not about money. It's about you realizing that you have to understand your value and know that you were given God's tools in yourself to do whatever that you want to do. And with the Jupiter, with all the Capricorn, it's like, hello, like, now that South Node's gone, it's not the kind of like, oh, this reality of it might be this or it could be this way. It's like, no, you have who showed up, who played the game right, and who knows their values and tools. Like, it's that kind of harsh that people are going to have to get out of the, everything will be fine and I can just wait for the universe or the government or somebody or this group's going to save everybody and they're going to be able to negotiate for me and I don't have to do anything and just sit here and watch on TV and wait till it all happens and wait in the mail now to see something show up. It's like, that is not going to happen.
Yeah, no waiting. All for taking our own authority and power back in the micro decisions and yeah, starting at square one with that.
Yep, simple stuff. Like, get back to being a little kid again in yourself and drawing and finding the wonders of the universe through your friend with your convo with your best friend over something tiny, and finding the common energy of, you know, wherever I go. If I'm on a street corner in the city, I'll just be like, hey, what's going on, dude? I don't know who you are, whatever, but it's just like, hey, I like your shoes. Like, I got the same ones, or, you know, you have to sometimes start with that. And when you get in these crazy conversations, because families are being disrupted, relationships are being disrupted, and love, all of it, colleagues of work, all of it, it's like, get back to like some basic way to twin with the other person, you know? And if you don't see that, then you just bail out, like you said, or slide out, just chill.
Yeah, twin with the other person. I like that. So thank you.
No problem. Thank you.
Perfect. I know that I am feeling more aligned around the nodal shift after having that conversation, and that I am looking forward to moving through these transits as they come, and as I go through some cool things on my end, how to navigate that now feels more secure after this commentary. So right now I am leading and finishing my course that will be available for download and for purchase at the end of the summer. So stay in tune for that if you're interested. Otherwise, you know, if you do share it and you share your review, you will get sent my Astro Basics workbook. If you want to, you know, spread the word, it helps out, I help you out. Mutual little symbiotic relationship there. So with all that being said, have an awesome tying up of your eclipse season, and I will see you in the next one. Sat Nam.
But there is one thing you're all